Hey guys, welcome back. How are you doing? Ready for another incredible story?
We can't wait to listen to it.
So switch on your antennas and get yourself ready to be carried away by the imaginary world of Yayoi Kusama. Or if you say it in Japanese, you should say Kusama Yayoi, because in Japan, the surname comes before the given name.
Today, we are going to be learning about the life of one of Japan's most important living artists. Why do you need to know about Yayoi Kusama? Yayoi Kusama's life is a story of someone who has always had a plan for herself. Her plan has been, and still is, to live exactly as she wants to. And she has been able to do that. Calling out for her imagination, determination, ambition, but mainly her love for true self. Yayoi Kusama was born on the 22nd of March 1929 in Matsumoto City, Japan. She comes from a wealthy and very conservative family. Her parents used to constantly argue, and with the outbreak of the Second World War looming, Yayoi's dreams of escaping at the earliest possible moment was inevitable. But before that day came, the only thing Yayoi lived for was her artwork. All she did every day was draw. Her main focus at that time was intimate pastels and watercolours, interpretations of nature, flowers and rocks. Along the stony bank of the river behind her house, she would collect rocks and count them one by one, and it was there that her obsession for repetition and multiplication started and set the foundation for her art. In the midst of this difficult environment, Yayoi began from quite a young age to experience regular visual and oral hallucinations. She would see auras around objects or hear the speech of plants and animals. During a walk with her grandfather, she came across a pumpkin. According to her account, the pumpkin immediately began speaking to Yayoi in an animated way. Enchanted by its catching form and fascinated by its simplicity, she painted many pictures of it. Whenever she experienced those hallucinations, she would hurry back home and draw. Recording them before they vanished helped her to understand what she saw and to overcome the shock of the episode. At that time, Japan, like many other countries, was very conservative and filled with taboo and strict boundaries. Seeking for mental health help was not possible nor accepted, and Yayoi felt completely cut off from both her parents and society. Overwhelmed by her visions, she started to suffer anxiety and asthma, and she lost some of her hearing. Art became her someone to go and talk to. She could open up to art and find comfort from it when no one else would listen. A Japanese woman dreaming of becoming a painter, travelling to the USA to be free to spread her vision of the world, whilst promising to stay faithful to herself, was certainly a fanciful idea at the time. But for Yayoi Kusama, this dream was to become a reality, and the fanciful idea was set to turn her into a revolutionary figure. Determined not to abandon her dreams, Yayoi got in touch with one of the three top female artists of the 21st century, George O'Keeffe, and she sought help and support from her in getting to the USA. O'Keeffe, who you can see in this picture, became Yayoi's mentor and always kept in contact with her through replying to letters and offering advice and wisdom. It had taken Yayoi 8 years to convince her mother to allow her to go to America, but eventually her persistence paid off, and on the 18th of November 1957, at the age of 17, she finally left Japan and landed in America. Yayoi held her first solo exhibition in Seattle at the Dusan Gallery. It was a success, but not enough for the ambitious Yayoi, who headed to her final destination, New York. At that time, America was facing a war with Vietnam. Many people were protesting against it, and because of the huge cost of this war, a lot of people found themselves in huge poverty, and so did Yayoi. She struggled to get enough food. She had no heating in her studio, and she used an old door she found abandoned in the street as a bed, and pushed herself to work even more, Her commitment to a revolution in art made her forget the cold and hunger. She literally poured every penny she had into materials and canvases, forgetting sometimes to eat for days. Remembering that time, she said, "Sometimes, when I felt miserable, I would make my way to the top of the Empire State Building. Looking down from the world's greatest skyscraper, I felt that I was standing at the threshold of all worldly ambition, where truly anything was possible. My hands are empty now, but I shall fill them with everything my heart desires, right here in New York." Yayoi is sometimes called the Princess of the Polka Dots. Although she makes a lot of different types of art, they have one thing in common: dots. In New York, Yayoi covered canvases with dots and nets, and then continued painting them on tables, on the floor, and finally on her own body. Yayoi wanted to measure and investigate the infinity in relation with herself and others. Every polka dot represents a single life, a single particle among billions. While repeating this process over and over again, the nets began to expand to infinity, filling the whole room, and the single dots disappeared in the nets, as do the single lives in relation to the vastness of the universe. Yayoi was seeing the polka dots as a way to infinity. By adding dots to the canvas, the room, and her body, Yayoi wanted to obliterate herself and the objects, with the final goal to becoming part of the universe, melting in it. From 1961, something new appeared in her art. Yayoi threw herself into the soft sculpture period, which she used to overcome some of her biggest fears with. She was disgusted and frightened by the idea that people gobbled up tons of machine-produced food and couldn't take her mind off the image of thousands of servings of macaroni. Yayoi was also scared of sex. Because of her strict education and the environment she grew up in, she thought it was something dirty and to be avoided. This is why she made clothes, accessories, armchairs, as well as other pieces of furniture completely covered with the macaroni pasta or the male reproductive organ, the penis. Yayoi reproduced these objects again and again, making hundreds and hundreds of them. That was her way of facing her fears. She turned these objects into something familiar and funny. In 1963, she had a solo exhibition in New York titled Aggregation 1000 Boat Show. This is where her sculptures were surrounded on the ceilings and walls by 999 black and white poster photos of it. This installation would cause the effect of seeing boats spinning around you, leaving you seasick. Andy Warhol, a famous American artist, came to the opening and was mesmerized by her work, to the point that a few years later he stole her idea and papered the ceiling and walls in the gallery with a silkscreen poster of a cow's face. Yayoi also created environments of dots, so that we could experience the feelings of self-obliteration that she had always been looking for. She calls these rooms infinity rooms. Yayoi started to use mirrors and plastics in her installations, allowing them to become more 3D in order to extend the effect of affinity, so that whoever was looking at it had the feeling of being in an apparently endless space. In 1966, Yayoi put on a show called Endless Love in a hexagonal room with mirrors covering the walls, floor and ceiling. She had small coloured electric lights embedded in the ceilings that were programmed to blink non-stop and change their patterns along with the music. The psychedelic images made the work a kind of kaleidoscope which tried to reproduce life in its declination of life and death. The lights represented the joy of our lives and the darkness that follows the death. In a blink of an eye or a light, a new baby is born and someone has passed away. Yayoi embraced the rise of the hippie culture, who opposed the war and established values and institutions dreaming of a world of peace and love. She organised a series of happenings in which naked people were painted with brightly coloured polka dots. In the happenings, she was the creator and the choreographer, but never a participant. People were starving for love and peace, and she used those events to give a message of sexual liberation and to declare her anti-war position. Hippies and the minority loved her and her happenings, to the point that they referred to her as the Queen of Hippie. The creative side of Yayoi is endless, as she submerged herself into a variety of projects. She became an entrepreneur and gave life to the Kusama fashion company, producing and selling dresses and textiles. All the clothes she designed were of course decorated with polka dots. The brand was known for its daring pieces and had great success and collaboration with big fashion companies such as Louis Vuitton. For Yayoi, this was another way to send out polka-dotted objects through the world in her long life quest of obliteration. Yayoi also set up the Kusama International Film Production Company that she used to sell films of the happenings, but also to produce and direct new films on topics dear to her. Yayoi also ventured into the publishing business, putting out weekly newspapers of which she was the chief editor, and she furthered her publishing ventures with a book of poems and several novels. In the meantime, Yayoi continued with solo exhibitions. All these projects had the final goal of reaching as many people as possible to spread her vision and messages. She returned to Japan only twice, and on her second trip to Tokyo in 1973, she was overwhelmed in seeing how her people had lost their individual tracks and traditions to follow and keep up with the modernization of the West. This change left her feeling disorientated and lost. Getting out of the city, Yayoi felt relieved, and she found the familiar heart-stopping beauty in the fields and hills of her Matsumoto had not changed. Meadow grasses, rivers, silver snow at the top of mountains, magical colours of an uncontaminated nature made Yayoi proud to call this place her home. Whilst Yayoi was in Tokyo, she had a mental breakdown. And, since 1977 to this very day, she lives, by her own choice, in a mental hospital in the capital. This didn't stop her from continuing what she loved, as she kept working and producing a series of nature collages. Yayoi had always been fascinated by the assembling and pasting together of bits of shredded paper, or filling boxes with stones collected from the river. She made these collages for her own pleasure, but also as a homage to Joseph Cornell, one of the pioneers and most celebrated exponent of assemblage, with whom she was extremely close for several years. Japan took longer to recognise Yayoi's talent than America, but in the end they awarded her with prestigious prizes, such as the Foreign Minister's Commendation, and they asked her to represent Japan at the 45th Venice Biennale, one of the world's most prestigious international art exhibitions. There, in her home country, she is still finding her way to turn her ideas and visions into art, absorbed in her creations, living the life she planned for herself.
So tell me, how was it?
All these pictures of pumpkins and tons of macaroni cheese made me hungry.
We were sure about it. Can you possibly think for a second of something different?
Sorry, but I skipped my breakfast today, and I couldn't help to imagine myself covered in hundreds of chocolate cookies.
Dots covering everything, objects repeated thousands of times, flowers and plants talking. You were right, she lives in her own world. I am starting to see dots everywhere I look now. Still trying to understand what we can take from her story.
Yayoi said, I was 17 when I went to US. If I hadn't made it there, I don't think I would be who I am. Her life shows you that you shouldn't be scared of getting outside your comfort zone. Dare to take risks, even if it seems everything and everyone is against you. Sometimes the most difficult paths turn into the most worth it.
Yayoi really tried to get what she wanted with all her might, and she made it.
Exactly. And she stayed true to herself and gave her thoughts and feelings the right to exist, and the chance to be heard. There is always a way to escape a reality you don't like. In a drawing, sculpture, or a travel overseas, like she went for. You just need to find the right one for you.
大いに考えて、大いに戦って、人生の中で素晴らしい助言を自分の心の中から叩き出して、それを皆に全世界にまき散らして、そして素晴らしい人生と素晴らしい世界を築きたいと私たちは痛切に思っておりますので、皆さん大いに一緒に